So the way I've structured the talk is I'll start off by talking a little bit about Walmart. We'll talk a little bit about our strategy, how we are evolving as a company. Obviously, you're hearing a lot about us, especially more recently in India with regard to the investment we've made at Flipkart. So I'll talk a little bit about what our strategy is, how we are evolving, what's the kind of transformation we're going through as a company. And then what I'll do is I have several use cases of problems that we're solving for customers as well as for some of our internal stakeholders, whether that's buyers, whether that's our HR teams, our enterprise teams, and how we're applying technology to solve those problems. We do about 265 million customer touchpoints every week across all of our stores and our e-commerce sites. So that's 265 million times a customer is coming in through one of our doorways and transacting with us. We do about 2.3 million. I think this number has gone up to about 2.3 million associates. So that's 2.3 million employees worldwide. That includes all of our employees in the stores, our distribution systems, our fulfillment centers. We have a fleet of trucks that's about 60,000 large. We do about 700 million miles a year in our trucks. We have drivers who have put in like close to 1 million miles during the course of their lifetime. E-commerce sites and apps, and that number again has gone up. It's 11 countries now. The other thing that people don't realize, right? I mean, given our scale and size, there's a huge responsibility on us to be very, very conscious of the environment and the impact that we have. At our scale, if we don't do things right, the detrimental effects that we can have on the environment is very huge, and it builds up very huge, quickly. So 28% of all the electricity that we use is powered by renewable energy globally, right? And we're trying to increase that. So we're doing all sorts of things where we can tap into solar and wind energies to be able to run our stores, to be able to run our fleets, to be able to encourage our suppliers to also switch. We have two terms in our DNA of the company. One that's called EDLC, everyday low cost, and the other is EDLP, everyday low price. The idea is that if you're able to drive costs down, and if you're able to take costs out of the system by taking advantage of our scale and by working with our suppliers, then you can eventually pass that on to our customers in the form of everyday low prices. So we are constantly driving our suppliers to drive their costs down. And the way we do it is we are very open. We share our data with them. We share all kinds of analytics and insights with them, and we don't charge them for that like many other companies. But what we do ask our suppliers to do in return is to pass that savings on to us, and then we pass it on to the customers, right? The other thing that people don't realize about Walmart and about Sam in particular is that while he was extremely operational and very focused on cost, he was also a visionary when it came to technology, right? So the story goes that the engineer or the person who went to him and pitched that he wanted to put a satellite on every store, right? And what we did is we put satellite dishes on every store that gave suppliers and home office complete control and visibility into what was happening in the store on the shelves. And so suppliers could automatically get a view into which of their products were in short, needed to be restocked. And they would often directly send the stock to the stores. So he agreed to spend literally millions of dollars back in the late 70s, early 80s to put that satellite dish on every store. A people-led organization, but a people-led organization that's enabled through technology, right? So we use technology to enable being people-led. And so what we do is we want our people to be empowered through technology. And so we're using technology and digitization very aggressively across every aspect of the enterprise. So busy families are the largest spend and growth segment in the US, right? I mean, this is sort of just a way we are thinking about our customers and how we have segmented the market, so to speak. These are families, like I said, who are at the peak of activity and spend, and they're very time-starved and want to spend wisely. And so what we're doing is we're making sure that we are able to interact with them so that they can do business with us when they want it, how they want it, where they want it, right? So there's many examples of that that you will see that I'll talk through. Online grocery, where you can order online and then you can have it be delivered to your home, or you can come to the store and pick it up. There's what we launched a recent thing called Express Returns. So you can do all of the work. You can buy something online and you can do all of the work to return it online at your home, and you can just come to the store and drop it off, right? We recently introduced something called Pickup Towers, and in a recent trip, I used this. So I was coming back, and then my kids wanted me to buy some chocolates, I think it was. I didn't have time, so I ordered online, but then I said I'll pick it up from the store, and on the way to the airport, I stopped by at a Walmart store, and you have this long tower where you just go and key in your order number, and there's a sort of automated system that will bring your order up to the top, and you just pick it up and go, right? So the entire time, from the time I left my car in the parking lot to the time I went into the store, picked up my chocolates, and I came back, was about 2 minutes, of which only 30 seconds was actually spent in the store. The remaining 1.5 minutes was walking from the parking lot to the store and back, right? So that's convenience. Like I said, we have about the 5,000 to 6,000 stores that are doing business. We have the online, and then with omni-channel, we have the intersection here. So what we really want to do is we want to continue to run great stores. We want to be known for the value. So we want to deliver value. We want to have a very strong merchandising business. We want to provide convenience and ease of interaction. One of the things that the teams here in Bangalore do is to build not just a centralized data platform, but then also build a machine learning layer on top of it. And the approach that we've taken to the machine learning layer itself is sort of interesting. So this is a centralized platform, right? I mean, what you have is essentially, like I said, the lake, data flowing in from a bunch of different sources, including third-party data. So what we'll do is we'll take data from sources like Hyperion, which will give you customer data based on credit card, right? It won't identify who you are, but it'll identify what sort of a customer you are. And we store all of that centrally, and then we build consumption layers. The key is that the consumption layers need to be extremely real-time in nature, right? So 2 examples I'll give you. One is that if I'm a merchant, right? So I'm a merchant, meaning I'm a category leader. I'm selling, let's say I'm home and furnishing. Every day in the morning when I walk into the office at 6 a.m. US time or 9 a.m. in the US, I want to be able to immediately look at how my category is doing in the last day. I want to be able to look at the data from the last day. And if I'm running a sale, I want the data to be like current up to the minute, right? Typically, because oftentimes what I want to do is see how people are responding to my sales and then dynamically adjust pricing, dynamically adjust the assortment mix or whatever else. And so to be able to do all of that, I need to be able to essentially have a consumption layer running off of the storage that's pretty much in real time, right? And now doing that at this kind of scale. So what we have done is we have built a system that essentially uses many different kinds of technology. So we are recently experimenting with ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot is essentially a company that gives you, it was founded by the same people who founded Nutanix, right? And what they're doing is they're building the system that essentially provides extremely large-scale data processing and visualization in near real time. We're also we're using Druid as a sort of intermediary layer on top of a data lake on which we run a tool called Looker. And that's the other thing about Walmart, right? Many companies come and want to work with us because of our scale. And for a company of our size, we are extremely progressive when it comes to working with smaller companies and partners. And ThoughtSpot is a classic example where pretty much they built their company based on our business, and now they're selling to a lot of other customers as well. To be sure, we are very aggressive in pushing them on pricing and things like that. But what we're doing is we manage to make sure that they are growing with us as well, right? So that's one example. And then on top of that lake, what we're doing is we're building what we're calling our algorithmic product layers and our machine learning layer. And here again, we have taken a very interesting and open approach to it. So we have sort of created the machine learning platform as almost like a CI/CD for machine learning. The challenge with machine learning often is that your data scientists they are essentially people who are really good at math and sort of analytics. They want to be able to come in, develop a model, experiment and try how good that model is working and build sort of a very quick real-time flow, right? So you're constantly getting data in, they're running their algorithms, they're making the changes to the system, and then they feed it back in, and then more data is flowing in. If that cycle is going to take you days, then the whole point of sort of the value of it is getting lost, and data scientists get very frustrated. And what you'll realize in many companies, is that data scientists often spend 60-70% of their time not building the models, but messing around with the infrastructure, because the infrastructure that they have is completely unreliable. They never have the data that they want because they can't run their algorithms and production systems until they perfect it, but they don't have access to the data. So what we have done is we have created this platform as essentially a CI/CD pipeline for data scientists, right? So data scientists can come in with their own notebooks, their own algorithms, plug it in. And then the other thing that we've done is a lot of the algorithms now more and more are taking advantage of GPU as a construct, right? So what we're doing is we're essentially making available to a data scientist the ability to be able to tap into GPU in a very, very seamless way, which then just means that, the time it takes to compute the results and feed it back in is shortened dramatically. And the other thing that we're trying to do is to say that you don't necessarily have to be in this modern stack. Like I said, we have a lot of systems that are still running legacy. We have mainframes in our distribution centers, and they're running legacy algorithms. So for example, many of our supply chain optimizations are sort of still old school optimization algorithms, that are built on old school techniques. And if we can use GPU very effectively through this platform, then you can actually speed up that entire process fairly dramatically. And so a lot of our effort is really focused on that. And this in some sense forms the core and the base of all of our algorithms that we build on top of it, right? So this is sort of, you can think of it as, there's two parts of our infrastructure that are at the heart of our systems. And I'll just call on Unni here to stand up and wave very briefly. So Unni runs a lot of our production infrastructure and our, global sort of platforms, right? So his teams in India run and build many of that. So we have two platforms at the heart of our system, one called Strategy, which is really all of our private cloud platforms. And we're now moving into more and more of a public and private cloud hybrid. So we just announced a relationship with Microsoft where Azure is going to be one of our platform of choice. And we're going to use Azure pretty extensively, but then we also have a relationship with Google, and we're looking at GCP for some of the core underlying infrastructure for this. And then on top of that, we have our data platforms, right? And again, the idea is that the data platforms is not just for offline processing, but also for online processing. As a case in example, in many cases our merchants, right, particularly in Jet.com, they run a sale or they introduce a new category and they want to see how it performs. And so pretty much we have to look at real-time sales data coming in through our systems that goes through pretty much this entire flow. And then you have our merchants being able to access the dashboards in real time to see how a particular item is responding to price changes and then tweaking and making those price changes, which then gets fed into our pricing systems. And you'll see prices adjust and change dynamically on our site. For Walmart, pharmacy as a business is, I think, about a $40 billion business. And we are, I think, the third or fourth largest pharmacy in the country, right? But because we have built it over time, it's an extremely store-centric system. And when I say it's an extremely store-centric system, what I mean is that all of the technology and including the physical hardware that is used to run it is in the stores today. And it has its advantages, right? That it offers you a very high degree of resilience, because as long as the store is running and you have power in the store, everything will work. You're not dependent on the cloud or for that kind of connectivity. But it also, over time, as we have scaled, it has huge disadvantages. A classic example is that given that we have 5,500 stores, right, we have many of our stores that are close to each other, typically within 5-10 miles of each other. So we have the situation where some stores are extremely busy and you have a very high volume of customers coming in, wanting to transact. And some stores are not so busy. So you could have a situation where there's a store, let's say right here, that's extremely busy. The pharmacist can hardly keep up with the traffic. And a store 10 miles away it's completely empty. They have, but we have no way of offloading work from this store to that store. We have no way of diverting customers, saying if you live in between the two stores, even though you dropped off your prescription at this store, you can go to the other store and pick it up, right? So that's something that we want to solve for. The other thing is, as we have gone in and as cloud computing has become more and more as ubiquitous, and as the cost of computing has gone down, we want to be able to leverage cloud computing more aggressively to be able to defray some of the costs, but also to introduce things like remote pharmacy, where I can have a remote group of people in a remote center that are doing many of the back office work related to the prescription. And then the pharmacist in the store is spending a lot more time interacting with associates rather than with our own back office systems. And if I can do that centrally, I can do workload optimization much better, right? And then finally, tech modernization. You laugh when you hear about this, and I've been at Walmart for 1.5 years now, and on one of my first visits, I went and visited a store and I visited a pharmacy. And so we started this project around the same time that I joined. So I visited the store to just get an understanding of the system. All of the terminals that are running our pharmacy today in the stores, in every store in the US, is on Visual Basic. And so every time, so there's no concept of differentiating configuration and system, right? Everything is in the code. So every time I want to roll out a change, I have to roll it out literally in every store, in every system, which obviously means that the lead time for me to roll out a feature runs into the months, if not the year, into years, right? And so there's no notion of being able to do it centrally in one location and have it benefit every store. So that obviously causes huge operational issues for us. So we are sort of re-architecting this entire system in order to be able to do that very differently and much more efficiently. And so now we're starting to leverage the whole sort of device, the proliferation of devices in a way that allows us to take advantage of that. Again, collecting data all across the supply chain, our entire value chain, so to speak, and then flowing that data and taking decisions based on that, right? So I'll talk about one specific example that's really useful, but what's really the opportunity? The opportunity is that you can become a completely integrated omni-channel retailer, and you can drive EDLC through the efficient use of devices, right? And at our scale, we want to constantly also drive down the price of these devices significantly. So one of the things that people don't realize is how much Walmart is doing today with automation, whether it's IoT, whether it's robotics. For example, in our stores, we have two kinds of systems that are being experimented with, right? One is called the Bossa Nova robots. So these robots are essentially robots with scanners that are traversing the aisles of our stores, and they're scanning the shelves. Because our stores are huge, right? It's impossible for us to manually scan, and the idea is that we want to make sure that on every shelf the items are well stocked. And so if you run short, if the shelf is bare, then it'll immediately send a signal to the back office or the back store, and then the back store operator will immediately sort of say, okay, I have to go restock this item, right? So that's one example of automation. Another is recently we introduced this where because the stores see a lot of traffic, we see a lot of spillage on the store, right? I mean, somebody will knock over a can of juice or a bottle of water or whatever, and it'll create a spill in the store. And that causes problems because somebody can slip and fall and have injuries. Our own associates can get injured, our customers could get injured. So we have robotic floor cleaners, right? These are essentially systems that are about this tall that just go all around the floor, cleaning the floors. And it's really funny when you walk into some of our stores, you'll see people react very differently to it, right? 80% of the people will just look at it and won't think about it and continue shopping. And then you'll have kids who will go and stand in front of it like this. And then they'll keep moving and the thing will move because it's very wired to not collide, right? And then they'll jump away, then it'll start moving, then they'll again jump into its path and it'll stop. And it's kind of funny to watch it. But the point is that, as we start automating very aggressively, and imagine I have Bossa Nova robots that are scanning shelves. I have other floor cleaner robots. In our Sam's Club, I'll have, we are starting to think about, we haven't started that, but we're thinking about having drones fly through our stores to sort of, again, take inventory counts and so on, right? So I have this multiplicity of automation systems now flowing through, in the store. Scheduling becomes a huge problem, right? The last thing I want is like a Bossa Nova robot that's scanning the shelves to come and collide with a floor cleaner robot and have an accident there. So more and more we are working with the suppliers to sort of create this sort of centralized system which will allow us to schedule and work through these things. This is very much work that's in its infancy, so I don't have any slides on it, but this work is much further along. That is something that we're just now starting, and it's on its infancy, and you'll hear more about it as we start doing more and more in that area. But here what we're doing is, as a first step, we said, IoT is getting to be very, very prevalent. You have lots of devices now, right? And so HVAC is a huge use case for us, right? So the idea is that you have, heating, ventilation, and cooling. You have refrigerators, energy meters, right? So we'll take the example of strawberries as a classic example. So what we do, strawberry gets picked, and then typically one of two things will happen after it gets picked, right? Either it'll get loaded into a refrigerated truck right away, or if this is sort of local distribution center, it might be stored there very temporarily before it starts making its way into the supply chain. So you'll record the humidity and temperature using RFID and IoT sensors there, and that will make its way into a system, right? Centrally managed. Once that's done, we'll also obviously record the time. And then as it moves through the supply chain, right, we will continuously track and monitor it. And then what we'll do is when it finally hits the store, by the time it hits the store, we would have used predictive analytics to say, okay, if it started at this point in time, and if the temperature and humidity was sort of at this level of variation throughout the supply chain, then we will predict that this is how long the strawberry is going to be fresh, right? But the idea is to kind of use this whole idea of devices at the edge, massive data platforms available on the cloud with sort of automated controls, and flow it back through our entire system to be able to take corrective action across the entire value chain in a very, very predictable way, but also in a very automated way that allows us to be a lot more efficient and productive. A fairly big and major rewrite of our retail implementation in India recently, we are calling it Gen Next, and the idea is to look at essentially use SAP end-to-end across e-commerce and retail and redo our entire system to be much more again automated, right? Just to give you an example, I went to a store in Agra recently, right? So they have a small room about this size. Actually, it's about the size of these two rooms put together. And all that does is it stores registers, right? Manual paper, which is of everything that's coming in, tracking it, tracing it, and all of that. Because of compliance reasons, we have to be able to go back and produce that documentation at any point in time, right? And just if you look at the real estate that is occupying, but just the amount of paper and ink itself is a huge challenge. So what we're saying is, if we can use an automated system and put all of that into a system and use the system more effectively, then that allows us again, to be a lot more environmentally responsible. It allows our operators to be a lot more efficient. And that's a model that we can roll out to other similar markets like South Africa, Chile, Argentina, etc. Right? And so truly successful at omnichannel, and to be able to run this sort of a business at this scale, enabled by technology, you have to have a very different mindset than if you were just writing software and building purely digital systems, right? Because while the systems themselves are digital, the way people use them day in and day out, it's very different, because there is this sort of very unique intersection in retail of what I call the trifecta, right? Of people, space, and physical items. So I'm running a digital system, but oftentimes it's used by real people, which is true even in the case of all software. But it is in the mix of real items moving through your value chain in a constrained physical space.